Donald Trump's pick to lead the DEA draws scrutiny for arresting a pastor during the COVID lockdowns. Trump's plan for mass deportations is already facing pushback from House Republicans, and the mainstream media tries to convince the public that Joe Biden was justified in going back on his promise not to pardon Hunter Biden. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd. Did Joe Biden just rewrite the rule book on presidential pardons? He issued a sweeping pardon to his son Hunter, covering every federal crime that he's committed in the past decade. And the best part has been watching the liberals try to justify it. Take a look.
Now look at the dance Democrats have to do.
Be honest. The only reason why they went after Hunter the way they did, and I've talked to many federal prosecutors about this, is because he's the president's son.
People have to remember the president has lost 2 children already, and he does not need to lose another one to more political witch hunts.
Crowing from Republicans, but we're talking about, Donald Trump is a convicted felon who literally pardoned his daughter's father-in-law and just made him ambassador to France.
So for anyone that wants to clutch their pearls now because he decided that he was going to pardon his son, I would say take a look in the mirror.
Here to break down how far-reaching this pardon is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Sean Davis. He's the CEO of the Federalist. So Sean, thanks for joining us. How unprecedented is a pardon like this?
I think it is absolutely unprecedented. And based on the research that we've done looking at past pardons, which is admittedly a little tricky, we believe this is the most expansive, the most broad and wide-ranging pardon ever issued in American history. If you look at even the Richard Nixon pardon given to him by Gerald Ford in the wake of the Watergate scandal in 1974, that was only 5 years. This one that Hunter's gotten is 11 years. And you can go back even further if you want to look at pardons given to Confederate generals after the Civil War, people who literally waged war against the United States. Theirs were not as expansive as this. They at least had to go and pledge loyalty to the United States, apologize for what they had done. So to see the president give his son, who we all know acted as a bagman for him and his foreign influence peddling schemes, to see his son get the biggest, most widest ranging pardon in American history, it's shocking to me.
Well, Sean, what I love about this is that we're all learning about something that I'm personally shocked about, which is that the DOJ apparently has been conducting politically selective prosecutions. That's good to know, and we need to do something about this. I'm sure you feel the same. Do you think that this is revelatory in some way? I mean, does this really change the game? Are we in a bubble right now, or are we in a bubble right now talking to each other about things we already know? We already know this is how the system works, right? But some people are arguing that this is pulling down the veil and it will resonate and have a larger effect. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it resonates in 2 ways. It's revelatory in 2 ways. One is the dates involved. So it goes back to 2014. What was going on in 2014? Well, that's when Joe Biden, as vice president, was running point for Barack Obama's Ukraine policy. At that point in time, Biden was effectively the viceroy of Ukraine. A month later, in February 2014, the U.S. government helps to overthrow Ukraine's government. I believe 3 months later, in May of 2014, Hunter Biden was placed on the Burisma board, which he was paid millions of dollars to do. So it's revelatory just in what the dates show us, because for it to go back that far, it has to be related to things that Hunter was doing with Joe Biden at the time. But it also shows us certain things about how the Democrats view DOJ and how they view the pardon system. If they were worried about J6 protesters maybe being pardoned before this happened, they don't need to worry about that anymore, because that's 100% going to happen. By doing a pardon of this nature for the president's son, it basically makes it impossible for Democrats to complain or argue about any pardons going forward ever again.
Yeah, in this pardon, it's so vast, as you're saying, and there's actually a Democrat representative out there, Jerry Connolly, is out there saying we shouldn't have such sweeping pardons in the future. And it's interesting that this is coming from the Democratic side because they know at some point the Republicans, this time it's going to be January 20th, Republicans are going to be back in office, Sean. So what should be done here moving forward?
Well, yeah, so a lot of people are complaining about the pardon. I personally don't have a problem with the pardon power. It's very explicit in the Constitution. The president has total authority to do this with two exceptions. One, they have to be limited to federal offenses. And two, you can't pardon someone who's been impeached. That's it. So the founders in their wisdom set this policy out and this power out for a reason. The bigger problem here is the corruption within DOJ. So Democrats are actually right on this count, but in the wrong direction. Hunter Biden was not the victim of selective persecution. He was not targeted because he's the president's son. This only ever happened. He should have been in jail 10 times over for what he was doing. They didn't nail him for his Burisma payments, for money laundering, for potential sex trafficking, for operating as an unregistered foreign agent. He was shown extreme deference. He was shown extreme favor because he was the president's son. And for the people on the left to come out and say DOJ's icky because it charged Hunter Biden for committing a gun crime we all knew he committed, while at the same time excusing a raid of Mar-a-Lago and Melania's and Barron's underwear drawers. Like, the problem here is a completely corrupt DOJ and FBI, and the pardon power is just downstream from that. So if you want to prevent this type of nonsense from happening again, we need to completely reform DOJ and FBI.
Well, as we know, no one is above the law. That's a fundamental part of American political life these days. What about Hunter in the future and the Biden family? Do you think that, the fallout of this, does everyone just move on? The Republicans move on? Will there actually be some sort of investigation? Some people are saying this puts Hunter in more of a bind in some ways, that he might actually have to, he'll spill the beans. What do you think about all that? Do we get anywhere with the Biden family?
I think a lot depends on where we go next. Is this going to be the only Biden family pardon? If not, if we see a pardon for James Biden, if we see Joe Biden himself give himself a pardon, which I believe is authorized under the Constitution, there's no limit on who a president can pardon. I think that will determine how Republicans handle this going forward. But you mentioned a great point with Hunter now no longer having any criminal legal liability for his activities over the last 11 years. He's no longer allowed to plead the Fifth Amendment and refuse to testify in federal cases, including before Congress, if he is subpoenaed and called to do so. So this may actually end up getting the Biden family in more trouble unless, of course, they pardon themselves and make it so no one can prosecute them ever.
Sean, in the time that we have left with you, I want to talk about the DEA nominee that Donald Trump had. It's Chad Chronister. He's a Florida sheriff. You, Thomas Massie, our colleague Liz Wheeler, you guys have all been out there and critical of this decision. So tell us a little bit about Chad.
Well, yeah, so Chad Chronister, he was the sheriff, or is the sheriff of the Tampa area, which has traditionally been pretty blue. So he did things that I think you might expect to see a blue politician do. He made arrests for breaking COVID. He was doing DEI stuff, celebrating Pride Day. And I think what we're going to need to figure out as he goes through these confirmation hearings for DEA director is, were you doing that because you thought you were doing the best to represent the blue citizens who elected you? Or were you doing that stuff because you really firmly believed in your heart that that was your job, that you had to be pushing this left-wing nonsense? And I think if he wants to take over DEA, which is really totally focused on rooting out cartels and international drug crime, I think he's going to need to show in these hearings and throughout the confirmation process that he is completely devoted to Trump's agenda, to rooting out cartel violence and drug trafficking. And whether he can do that successfully will determine whether he's going to get confirmed as DEA director.
Sean, you mentioned, I think rightly, that you said there's thousands of solid sheriffs in this country who are far more qualified to run DEA. You're certainly right. There's thousands of sheriffs who are qualified. I've met a number of them through the Claremont programs that I'm involved with still. But do you have anyone in particular that you think would be a great fit for DEA?
No, I don't. And it's because it's such a particular job, especially within DOJ, which is where DEA is. You need someone who has the confidence of the attorney general and has the confidence of the president, and then has the confidence of the American people. So Chad Chronister might be a great guy for the job. He might be the perfect person to say, yes, sir, Mr. Commander-in-Chief, I'm going to go down there and destroy cartels. But we need to know, how committed was he to that woke COVID nonsense? How committed was he to DEI stuff? Or was he just doing it because he thought that was the law? That's what he thought he was elected to do. And how he answers that, I think, will determine his at least near-term political future.
We will definitely be watching to see. For all of those answers, Sean, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Steve Deace will be on to explain why the Bible supports mass deportations. Next. When it comes to whiskey, there's premium and then there's Fox and Odin. And once you take a sip, you'll see and taste the difference. Fox and Odin was created by a generation of whiskey makers, but they're all about honoring the legacy of pre-prohibition whiskey and blending it and finishing it. And they use the finest ingredients to craft ultra premium whiskeys that are rich, complex, and completely unforgettable. Now, they're rooted over in Michigan. It's a place that's known for its beauty and spirit of resilience. Fox and Odin brings that same passion to every bottle. Their whiskeys are crafted to celebrate the wild beauty that surrounds us every day. And this holiday season, pair their award-winning whiskey with your best moments. It's a cozy fire, maybe a shared meal, or some of the beautiful gifts that you have under your Christmas tree. However you're going to celebrate, make it even better with Fox and Odin and their double gold award-winning craft American whiskey, where heritage and craftsmanship come together in every sip. Buy it online at foxandodin.com and use code AMERICA for free shipping. It's foxandodin.com, code AMERICA for free shipping. American made and American proud. Trump's plan to deport millions of people is already facing pushback, even from fellow Republicans in Congress. And our next guest believes that there's a biblical argument to make for Trump's plan, as he recently argued in his piece for theblaze.com. Blaze TV host Steve Deace joins us now to discuss. So, Steve, a two-part question. One, any surprise because Republicans in Congress aren't playing on our team? And two, what is your argument for Trump's mass deportations?
Did you just meet me 5 minutes ago? Is my answer to number one.
I'm setting it up.
On number two, there's an entire book of the Bible called Nehemiah. One of my favorite books, by the way, and it's about a guy who returns back home to rebuild the walls of his once great civilization. And one of the things he does is mass deportations so that his culture is not, again, invaded by foreign influences that are anathema to their belief system, because he's got a heritage that he thinks he's got a providential and moral obligation to uphold. And then secondarily, in order to enforce that sentiment, he builds a wall. In fact, he spends the entire book building a wall. That's pretty much what he spends the entire book doing, and fighting people who don't want him to build said wall. So yes, I know there's going to be a lot of people in audiences like this that have been worked over by the milquetoast, lukewarm, spit out your mouth American church, but they would be what we used to call heretics.
Steve, I can't express in words how much I love being able to publish you at theblaze.com, writing things like this, because it's so true, and it's so one of those things that's wonderful. It's so obvious when you point it out, like, oh yeah, that is what Nehemiah is about, huh? Mass deportations and building a wall. Interesting. So that isn't intrinsically evil. Why do you think? I mean, let me put it this way. How do we get out of this when it comes to this argument that has been so drenched in Christianity, right? This sort of false charity, this false empathy. How do we get out of it? I mean, you pointed this out. I'm curious what the response has been to your piece. But how do we move past this Christianity that is really just, it's like it's associated with a weird kind of liberalism,
I've gotten a lot of reaction, Matt, from people who had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, the last chapter of Nehemiah is one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible. He returns back home. He goes back to honor his debt to the king of Persia, because they're still technically in captivity. The Jews are, and so he goes back to honor that word in exchange for the king of Persia allowing him to come back and rebuild the walls. And he gets report that he's only been gone for a matter of a few years, and they've already let all the bad influences into the culture. So he goes back to Jerusalem again, Matt, and then he just goes full Russell Crowe gladiator at my command, unleash hell. And he literally talks about, I pulled out their beards and I beat these people for you, Lord. Remember what I did for you. That's literally how the final chapter of Nehemiah ends. And if you were to put that tome in the hands of many of today's pleated khaki, sweater-vested brigade that not inhabits as much as infests the pulpits of America, I mean, it would be like watching when water hits the Wicked Witch of the West. You'd watch them just sit there and dissolve right there. And then most of the women that are there, because it's mostly women that are in our evangelical churches these days, there's very few men. I don't know what it's looked like on your Catholic side, but it's pretty much the Rotary Club on the evangelical church, brother, except for the Calvinists and the Pentecostals. There are two groups that are often in opposition. They're bringing them in, and everybody else, man, it's just we're sitting here knitting sweaters, okay? And, I mean, the blue hairs would be sitting in the front row. I can't even, I thought we were supposed to be nice until death. But, yeah, I mean, and the fact, by the way, that this has to get published at the Blaze and is not taught from the pulpit, and the fact that a guy who once referred to 2 Corinthians is probably inadvertently more biblical on this than the vast majority of the church indicates, frankly, why we probably needed a Trumpian figure for this era. The church just, frankly, is not up to the task, man. It long ago abrogated. It took Gideon's golden fleece. It took it to the pawn shop. See what it could get for it.
Steve, I don't know if you can come up with a biblical analogy for this, but DC and NYC Mayor Eric Adams just said to cancel him for working with the border czar Tom Homan and Donald Trump. He said, cancel me because I'm going to protect the people of this city. He said, illegals are committing crimes, robberies, shooting police. I'm sorry. He's a Democrat mayor of New York City. I don't know if you can come up with a biblical analogy for that one, but we're happy that he's actually going out there and speaking the truth.
I mean, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike there, Jill. I'll come up with an analogy for anything. All right. May not be good, might not be accurate, but I'll give it my best shot. I think this is just good old-fashioned self-interest. And I said on the show here today, half tongue-in-cheek, but half serious, about some rumors I've heard about Nancy Mace primarying Lindsey Graham. I mean, I long for the days of grandstanding. I want to make self-interested politicians great again. I mean, if we're going to have a post-Christian culture, I mean, even in a Christian culture, there's a very limited amount of people that will do the right thing altruistically for the right reasons. So how many do you think there are in a non-Christian or post-Christian culture? Not many, right? So in that case, I'll take self-interest. Nancy Mace, clearly just a creature of self-interest, just craven to the point that you almost have to applaud. It's so shameless, right? Against Lindsey Graham, whose interests are just opposed to me. I mean, self-interest, I can buy off someone of self-interest, right? If someone's interests are just opposed to mine, I can't be aligned with them or trusted, or can I trust them? In the case of Eric Adams, I think this is his self-interest. The Biden regime's going after him. I think he'd like a pardon. But then also, his city's on the list of the 12 cities most racked with illegal alien crime. So I also think, the chance to, now he's got political cover. They've thrown him under the bus. They're coming after him. He wants a pardon. So there's really no reason for him to continue, carrying that burden on their behalf and inflicting the pain upon the citizens of New York City. He's got political cover now to act in his own self-interest.
Steve, I mean, that was a logical explanation for why Eric Adams is doing what he's doing. What is the logic moving forward to ensure that Trump is actually able to enact mass deportations and, build the wall, as it were?
Well, if you go back to his first term, almost everything other than the tax cut that he did that was good, Matt, he had to do via executive action. There was just no assistance there from the Republican Party. In this case, I think he's way more prepared for that. He's been way more aggressive. There's a senator from Oklahoma who's just a complete waste of oxygen, like a lot of these red state senators, Markwayne Mullin. And he was coming out saying, well, I don't know about Hegseth and Gates. And then, of course, Gates ended up stepping away. But Trump put out a message on Truth Social. Hey, I really like that Markwayne Mullin, and then reminded him he's more popular with his constituents than he is. He got more votes than he did. He's won every single county and precinct in Oklahoma in the last 3 presidential elections. That's kind of the political version of, that's a nice barbershop you have there on the waterfront, man. Be a shame if something happened to it, right? And there's going to have to be, I think, be a lot of that. And one of the biggest reasons that I didn't back Trump in the primary is I didn't think he would be capable of this. I saw him too often not push buttons, not lean on Paul Ryan when he had the chance his first term, try to cut deals with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and hire his wife, Elaine Chao. But this time now all the stuff that they said about him that he didn't live up to his first term, dude is like living up to it before his second term even starts. And I am here for it. Pop the corn. We have not yet begun to clutch pearls, and I look forward to him turning Washington D.C. into crime alley.
I can't wait to see it there along with you. Let's go ahead and look up for the plans this weekend for Donald Trump. We're going to talk Notre Dame because we're talking about the cathedral, not the Fighting Irish. Trump is going to be there for the grand reopening. It's been 5 years since the fire, so the restoration is now complete. So what do you make of Donald Trump and his spiritual journey that he has taken then since July 13th and just him going over there for the grand reopening?
Well, it's going to make me feel old, Jill, but I know you kind of almost grew up listening to me. And so, I have long said, going back to when I was a local radio host, if I had a plug nickel for every time someone told me a Republican has had a spiritual awakening, all right, I'd own my own Mar-a-Lago right now, okay? In this case, though, I have heard this from a lot of people who in the past have snickered at this alongside with me, who have been around the former president and know him and his team fairly well. I think you see his own behavior. I mean, the level of restraint that he has demonstrated, the unwillingness to just wallow in the shallow end of the pool. And I go back to election night, man. And if there was ever anyone, I mean, you wouldn't even need the robust ego of Donald Trump. You could have the T level of most Republican senators. And after all you've been through, which is low, by the way, after all you've been through, and then you win an election like that, to come out and do the full Como D, how you like me now, no one would begrudge you of that. And yet he didn't do that on election night. He made it about the issues. He talked about RFK Jr. and others. And I was really struck by that. And the discipline that he has shown since, by the way, it's forced them to kind of now turn on each other, because we're not doing urination contests and really a bunch of stuff that, other than a few people on Twitter, no one else in America cares about because we can't meme it, And so I think that he's governing well already, showing great discipline already, casting a vision already. So and I think now he kind of views himself as maybe a herald of Western civilization, to borrow a phrase from one of his most noteworthy opponents, a bulwark, if you will, on behalf of Western civilization. That cathedral is a symbol of Western civilization. What happened to it when it was burnt to the ground, and then only I think it was the altar mat was what remained, I think is a symbol of the spiritual battle that's happening right now within Western civilization. And Trump won Catholics by an obscene level, 15 points in the last election. So I think it's prudent and appropriate for him to do this.
I mean, Donald Trump, he didn't do the "How do you like me now" on election night. It was wee hours into the early morning, Steve. A lot of things were cut there late in that early morning hour. But thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down for us.
You bet.
Yeah, I do appreciate what he has to say just about the mass deportations. Pop the corn, as Steve said.
Yeah, I mean, it is like there's only so much you can do at this point, right? I mean, there's a sense of you get to kind of open the Christmas presents and see what's in them. Some of them you might not like, but overall, it's super exciting. And you also get the sense of the dedicated seriousness. And I love Steve. He has his opinions. He holds them strongly, and he comes to them honestly. And you can see what he's saying is, I trust it even more, right, because of the journey that he's been on. So good stuff. Yeah, we'll have some more fun because our next guest will tell you why the Hunter Biden pardon is the crowning achievement of an administration that is built on lies. Just ahead. Everyone knows that college is a major investment, so it's important to do your homework, but you want to find a school that shares your values, but who has time to dig through all those websites to find what really matters. Well, I'm excited to share a new online resource for you that does the work for you. It's ChristianCollegeGuide.com, and this is the online directory of over 250 Christian colleges. It's a one-stop shop. Like any other college guide, you can find the basics, the acceptance rates, the tuition costs, the majors that you're going to have there. But what makes this different for ChristianCollegeGuide.com is you're going to be able to use this to learn about the school's faith traditions, its campus policies, and its spiritual life.
I mean, all the things that are going to show you what the college's true character is. And you'll find the answers for over 150 questions for every school that they profile, making this the definitive guide for Christian higher education. And the best part is it's completely free to the public. So go to christiancollegeguide.com and create a user profile and get started today. It's christiancollegeguide.com. Of all of the justifications for Joe Biden's pardon of Hunter, a recent CNN panel might have the most unique take. Take a look.
I think that we now have a president coming into office who's talking about firing squads, who's talking about running people around the country and making sure that everyone who's his enemy is going to be punished. And Hunter Biden lied about his drug use on a government forum when he was buying a gun. And he failed to file and pay taxes when he was a drug addict. He paid back those taxes with interest. Donald Trump himself was indicted for 17 counts of criminal tax fraud, more than Hunter, and he's going to be the president of the United
11
States.
years.
So
You're missing a few things here.
Was this just another attempt to distract from the real issue, or was it something more? Here to break it down for us is Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas, and he wrote about this for a piece on the Blaze.com. So, Julio, I mean, the firing squads of it all, like what is she even trying to refer to here?
I don't know, and that's always something, especially when it comes to people like her. They just pull things just seemingly out of thin air to say, well, Trump said this. And of course, with people thinking that, have Trump being as bombastic as he can be. But yeah, no, I don't know what exactly she was referring to. And I guess the question I would ask is, well, the firing squads for whom? Because that sounds like in the context of, gang members, people who are, death row and stuff like that. But I think it just further highlights that the reality is still setting in for these people. And I think that's why, and I can't believe I'm about to compliment CNN, but that's why particularly Abby Phillips' show is pretty good, because they get a good mix of people who are still clearly unhinged. And then you have people like Scott Jennings, you juxtapose that. And I think that show does a good job of showing the continued derangement that this election and Trump in general has brought on to people. But I think, moving forward, it's a matter of, well, you got 4 years to deal with this. And so you can either tone it down and accept the reality of it, or you're going to spend the next 4 years, putting yourself into a tizzy.
I mean, people may not know this out there, but online there is a popular meme about how Trump is going to put people in the crystals for 10,000 years. And that would have made me laugh. And I kind of hope he does that, actually. But the firing squads and these things that people are coming up with, how many people really believe this? Because there certainly is, a subset of her audience who actually seem to they really do believe that Trump is this dictatorial figure who is going to tear the Constitution to shreds and establish a fascist dictatorship. I believe that a lot of this is also hyperbole and that people are almost sort of play acting, right? But what is your take on that moving forward? I mean, how many people do you think really believe this?
Well, it is concerning hearing a comment like that from someone like her, because if you're not really on social media, and particularly TikTok, I mean, she has millions of followers. I mean, that's the reason why she's on the show. I mean, she does have influence, and people do follow her for her takes. I've seen some of her videos on X, even though it had the same reaction as Scott Jennings and made my eyes roll. But it is a significant part, and that's why I think, we haven't seen the type of street reaction the first time around when Trump won. But I think moving forward, again, once Trump actually starts implementing his agenda and the fear mongering over his agenda, Project 2025, and he's going to be a dictator, and he's the next coming of Hitler. That is concerning, because as we saw twice, people did try to take him out based on these hysterics, based on this hyperbole, right? I mean, the second guy, he did the whole, he's a threat to democracy. Democracy is at stake, which is straight from Democratic talking points. And okay, fine, maybe some Democrats have kind of nationally have kind of lowered their temperature and just said, okay, well, it's business as usual. That was the message that people were hearing for a very, very long time, and are still hearing that, even if it's not from politicians. They're hearing it from social media influencers. So I think the high of Trump winning is starting to fade a little bit, because now we're getting to the nitty gritty of, okay, now we're going to actually start to go ahead and move the agenda forward. But obviously some people, and not an insignificant part of the American population, is going to be just kind of a 5-alarm fire for the next 4 years. And that's significant because Jamal Bowman was also in part of that panel, and he's a very big fan of fire alarms.
Yeah, so Lee McGowan, that was the woman that was speaking there, talking about the firing squads. It said on there, I don't know if you caught this, but on that lower third that was on the screen, it says she's an author of A Review of Common Sense. And that, to me, like, some of the jokes just write themselves for this, Julio. But that brings me to one of Scott Jennings' posts on X. He said that there have never been a bigger set of liars in the office than the Bidens. He said, not even close, the entire term, one after another, over and over and over, and not on small petty stuff either. So that he posted as a quote tweet in response to this list. Transitory is inflation. Afghanistan was a success. The border is secure. Biden's fine. Those are cheap fakes. Biden had jet lag. He had a cold. The list of their lies goes on forever, Julio. So at what point, again, now they do have Scott Jennings there on the CNN panel who they're trying to even out some things. But at what point will the legacy media ever stand up and say, no, this isn't actually what's happening. We're actually going to go out there and report some of the truth?
I don't know. And I mean, that's a good question. And the real test is going to be starting January 20th. But me always being the cynic that I am, they're not really going to have that introspection to say, well, at least most of them aren't going to say, okay, well, let's try to change things up. I think we kind of have seen some areas of improvement in terms of, because, you know, some of the media say, well, maybe we shouldn't treat everything as the end of the world that Trump does. But then again, at the same time, when you look at some of the things where, you know, the news around some of his cabinet picks, and then, you know, people have just gone off the deep end with some of that in reaction to the news. So I think it's going to be a big test to see whether or not the media has learned from the first time Trump was in the White House. I don't think so. But I'm always willing to, you know, give benefit of the doubt when it's warranted. But again, we've talked about this before. The media has lost all credibility. Mainstream media has lost all credibility, and for good reason. It's not because of the audience. It's because of the actions from, you know, the propaganda and all the lies that have been disseminated throughout for a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see. I know, regardless of what happens, it'll be a good time for us at Blaze to get good stuff and to really take advantage of being able to report on some of the things that the new Trump administration is going to do, because, you know, there's a lot of things that need fixing, and they're going to be at the forefront, and we're going to be able to actually have access to that.
All right, Julio. So, you know, we had the election. It's over. We have inauguration coming. Where are we going to send you next? Maybe our audience should weigh in on where Julio should go in the next 3 months. But let's talk briefly about the sorts of things we want to do in the next couple months.
Yeah, so later I'm going to be heading to Mexico, actually, to report on the changing dynamics now that Trump has made his threats. The Mexican president has kind of changed her posture. And so there is a lot of unknowns now, because obviously stuff with the caravans and the mass migration, even from a historical perspective, that's now turned on its head because Trump won. And so I'll be heading down there to talk to the locals, talk to the migrants that are still there, to get their perspective and see what the plan is, because there was an expected rush at the border, but that really hasn't materialized. And we're thinking that that's because of the rhetoric from the incoming Trump administration.
All right. Yeah. Let us know in the comments, everybody. Let us know where you want to see Julio Rosas next.
Never mind January 6th, right?
That's right.
We gotta do a little DC action.
It's gonna be a big one.
That's the 20th. That's the 20th. That's what I think that's the next kind of big thing. We'll see what happens.
All right, Julio. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
When we come back, we'll showcase how California's green energy policies could make cars more expensive nationwide. Just ahead. Well, if you're a fan of what we do here and you like Julio's work and everybody else's work and you want to check out what we have, well, we have you covered. We have some awesome merch right now. Blaze Media merch. It's shopblazemedia.com. We have the Blaze Heritage, Blaze Media collections, everything all the way through to Trump Vance 2024 gear. And it's in a t-shirt, a jacket, a mug, so much more. Head over to shopblazemedia.com today. And don't forget to use promo code BLAZE10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. And it's the perfect way to rep Blaze Media and go save some money while you're at it. Go check it out now. California is at it again with their extreme emissions regulations that could make cars more expensive for all of us, no matter where you live. And we're talking about impossible quotas, massive fines for automakers, and even a new gas tax it's going to make drivers furious. We already know it. But here's the kicker. Even electric cars in California are starting to get so expensive to charge that even gasoline is starting to look like a cheaper option. So what does this mean for your next car and your wallet? Here with more is Lauren Fix. She's an automotive expert and she joins us now. So Lauren, you recently wrote about this for theblaze.com and it was about big emissions scams and the impact of California's mandate on car manufacturing. So tell us more.
There's a lot going on. So right now, California currently has from the California Air Resources Board a mandate that by 2026, 35% of all vehicles sold in the state of California should be all electric. That's 2026 is like two model years. Actually, we're driving 2026s right now. And that by 2030, all electric, and that no vehicles will be allowed to be sold in the state that are gasoline powered. That's going to be a problem considering the cost of electricity there is the highest in the country. And some of the things that Gavin Newsom's putting into place are just totally impossible, besides the fact that they're making it a mandate. So that means if you have an older car, you won't be able to sell it in the state. You'll have to buy out of state, which people will, and people will move in and out of the state. But what says in the article, and this is really interesting, there's a lot more to this, but besides the fact that it's costing each car that's sold today, every car that's sold today as we speak, has a $20,000 fine on top of it for not meeting the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, which is funny because that's carburetor in my book, fee on top of it. So every manufacturer is paying a loss of $20,000 on every car that's sold. So what they're doing in exchange is California has heard a lot of complaints from consumers. So they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to offer you, if you put an electric charger in your home, we're going to give you a credit, and that's a pass-through rate of about 47 cents for every single driver that will help them cover some of the costs of roads and bridges repairs. But don't worry, that's not the way it actually works. It's California. They're going to add a 68-cent tax starting the first of the year on every car that's sold. So that will make it even more expensive. So the idea is to incentivize you to give up your gasoline-powered vehicle, but then you have a car payment, higher insurance rates, and no place to charge.
Lauren, can you drill down a little bit more on how this is not only going to impact people in California? Because I think a lot of times people hear this and think, you know what, it's crazy. You know, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. I think that's why I moved, you know. But it's not going to just affect people there.
No, it's going to actually affect the whole country because car manufacturers are not going to build a car just for the state of California. They're going to build a car for the entire country. Now, back when I was a kid, there was California emissions listed as a line item, and you thought, oh boy, that's the car you don't want to buy. But today, because 17 states side with the state of California, which include New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Colorado, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Delaware, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't live in California. But those laws work together because those governors have all agreed that whatever California does, we're going to do. And so that leaves other states like Texas and Michigan and Florida saying, well, we don't want these standards. We're going to let people drive whatever they want, which is why people move there. But manufacturers are never going to build a car for 17 states for that one way and the rest for everyone else. So what President Trump will most likely do, and he's done this before, but I think he did it too late in his term. If I had his ear, I would tell him, go after the California Air Resources Board, get them to dissipate, because President Obama gave them even more power. So whatever California says, the entire country is forced to follow it. Car manufacturers can't afford to have billions of dollars in fines. Instead, they're taking millions of dollars in losses, and we're all paying for it.
Yeah, and Lauren, you mentioned You mentioned Florida, and that makes me think of the hurricanes with Helene and Milton. And you go with hurricanes and electric vehicles, and we all have seen the videos of the electric vehicles starting on fire in people's garages and just lighting the whole place up. I mean, what kind of demand is there right now for electric vehicles?
Well, I was actually in that area of Southeast Florida during Hurricane Ian. And I remember there was all kinds of announcements saying, if you have an electric car, park it outside, especially if it's flooded. And sure enough, cars were catching fire. And I went by a salvage yard and had a nice conversation with one of them. It was a brand new, beautiful Porsche parked next to a Tesla, a lot of great cars. And I said, what's the story? He goes, oh, because these cars are waterlogged. You don't want them, especially anything that's electric. I knew that, but I kind of wanted to hear it right from somebody who was living it day to day. Electric car sales in the state of Florida are not great. They're only, doing well in certain blue cities where there's some sort of incentive, and that incentive will go away. The moment President Trump puts his hand on that Bible on January 20th, that mandate disappears. The $7,500 tax credit will disappear. That's all part of what he promised, and I have no doubt that he will do that. And I'm hoping that when Sean Duffy takes over on the Department of Transportation, the first thing he's going to do is go after the California Air Resources Board. That is not something to wait. We need to get on that immediately so that car manufacturers can make money, which means more jobs, better product for us, and lower cost vehicles.
Speaking personally for myself, I wasn't going to buy an electric car until I saw that Jaguar ad. And then it just convinced me, seems like a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's talk
that's
about
a whole other conversation. I have an article coming out for that.
That we need to have with you at some point. But I want to talk about this other piece you wrote at the Blaze about how the states are blatantly violating the Constitution by charging drivers for every mile they drive. What's going on here? How are states doing this and enforcing this? Because this is disturbing.
Well, because they can get away with it, just like anything else. One state should not be giving the rules for all the other 49 states. Well, that's what's happening with California. And in this case, there was actually, this is way back from the 1800s, there was a legal case, and it's all in the article, so I don't have to spout out the actual case. But I do cover all the legalese on why it is actually illegal to charge by the mile, especially if you're in between states. So California is going to be charging by the mile. So is Nevada, Oregon, Washington State already charge that. So if you have an electric vehicle, they wanted higher fuel efficient cars, which means you use less gasoline, which means there's less money in the fund for roads and bridges. So they're going to make it up by double charging you and charging you by the mile. And how is the government supposed to know, oh, you're no longer in California, you're now in Nevada, oh, you're driving to New York, you're driving across country? It doesn't know that. It takes your total mileage and it sends you a bill. And if people are like, well, I'm not going to pay it. Well, it's a tax, so people typically do pay it. But by law, believe it or not, the Constitution states, and it's in legalese, and I cover that in the article, that it is illegal for anyone to be charging by the mile for interstate or intrastate travel. And that is what it came up to in the 1800s. It was stagecoach days. And here we are charging people, and people are paying it. So before, maybe we need to get either a class action lawsuit or get some attorneys involved.
Like you said, it's going to happen as long as people just keep going along with it. Lauren Fix, our car expert, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
And Peterson, I can't believe that is something that we're still having to deal with from the stagecoach day, like she said, all the way through. We're almost to 2025.
Yeah, the case, like he says, 1868, and as it says here, the Supreme Court rules that states can't impose taxes or regulations that burden the right of individuals to travel freely. And this is it really is remarkable. Now, I think, as she was implying, that there's some hope here that some good lawyers take up this issue and lay pipe to this, because this is ridiculous. Like, this needs to be destroyed. It's happening as she's pointed out. Lauren points out over and over again. If you go to the Blaze or you check out her YouTube channel, she points over and over again that this government interference, right, and spying on you and then charging you and watching you in the car. This is just, they are not going to stop people until we lay the smackdown on them.
The government is the ultimate. If you give a mouse a cookie, that it's just going to take more and more every time. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to wrap up the show. Stay tuned. Oh, electric vehicles are going to be all the rage, whether you like it or not. Lauren Fix was telling us by 2026, there are a lot of implementations. And by 2030 in the state of California, everything electric or die. Matthew Peterson.
I mean, look, I don't even have a problem with electric cars at all. I have no problem with electric vehicles. No problem with Tesla, whatever. I don't have a problem with it. It's a good option.
We like Elon. We're friendly with Elon.
Yeah. But the way that what's behind this and the way that they operate is really, really disgusting, and it does need to stop. I mean, it's just this kind of tyranny through digital technology, and then forcing everyone to buy the electric and get off the gas. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make sense.
And Lauren laid out all of the fines that are going to be involved in all of this. And it's like everything is just about to get more expensive. No, Trump's back in office. We want things to become more affordable again.
Well, what's really disturbing is like the government charging by the mile, like they're trying to do, plus the electric stuff it's almost forcing the mass of people not to be able to travel, right? You're supposed to stay in the pod and eat the bugs. And like you're not supposed to be able to freely roam about the frontier, as it were. Like you're supposed to stay in your place, and that's really, really disturbing to me. I think that's the opposite of America. Everyone should be able to get out and about, move about the cabin as much as possible. And in fact, everyone out there needs to do that more. We're all stuck to screens. People need to get in their car and drive places.
As long as you're here on this side of the border, as an American citizen, Go ahead. We had Steve Deace on the show saying there is, in fact, an entire book in the Bible. It's called Nehemiah. You might want to read it. We can go ahead and have the mass deportations, but a surprise to absolutely no one. A lot of the Republicans are going, you know what? I don't know if we're going to have the backbone to actually do this now for mass deportation.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about. You think about the nation, right, of Israel, and you think about back in the day the Jewish people, and I think it's weird because on the one hand, a lot of people on the right understand that it's a good thing that the Jewish people were able to be the Jewish people and have their culture, and on the other hand, right. There's this attitude today that somehow it's morally wrong to like mass deport people to keep a culture, as if that is inherently racist, fascist, whatever. And I mean, that's all over like every society that wants to stay together. You can't dilute it too much. And it doesn't matter who the peoples are. You mix a bunch of people together and you get chaos and anarchy, and that's how the Roman Empire dissolved. So very interesting to bring up Nehemiah, because for a lot of Christians, they don't want to hear that. Like they've been told, oh no, the only Christian thing to do is to accept everyone, millions of people throughout the world, mix them all together, that's fine, and all walls are bad. Even though the Vatican has a wall, even though Nehemiah is building a wall.
Yeah, our colleague Ali Bastucky wrote Toxic Empathy, talking about just this topic. But when I look at it, our culture right now is also the legacy media going out there talking about Hunter Biden and the pardon and saying, oh, it's okay. Like, we know that we told you so many times that it was never going to happen, but just forget that we said that.
So, I mean, I'm of two minds about this. I feel like I'm so cynical. Like, if you don't already know that this is how the world works and this is how corrupt it is, then I don't know what to tell you. But I kind of hold out hope that maybe there are actually people, right, who even are on the left who will be like, oh, this is shocking. I mean, maybe that's the case. I don't know. What do you think?
Is anybody actually going to be shocked in 2024 by something that Hunter Biden does? Because the actual tapes of Hunter Biden were shocking, but we were told, oh, don't look at what is on his laptop. It's nothing to see here. Move along. But this is what we have to deal with, everyone. This is why we always say welcome to the chaos. So make sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform and rate and review the show. It helps everybody else to find it. And don't go anywhere, because we'll be back here tomorrow night to break it all down.